Today is part 2 of our lab series. You've deployed Autolab and you've played around with the default templates that come with it, but you want to customize it. You have a different domain name you want to use. You want to deploy different operating systems. You'd like to deploy the server GUI instead of server core. How do we do that? Well, let's talk shop. Hey everybody, welcome to Minding the Key Store. I am Brian Roma, your shopkeeper, and we are going to cover customizing an Autolab deployment for Active Directory certificate services. So if you want to customize one of the deployments that doesn't come with Autolab out of the box, that's what we're going to cover today. But first, I want to ask you, so for your deployments, when you do your lab testing, what operating system are you concentrating on? Is it, what you have in production? Are you testing revision testing? So server 2012 or 2016? Are you a server 2019 shop, or are you bleeding edge and looking for Windows Server 2022 and trying to get that going? I'd love to hear in the comments below, what specific operating systems are you focusing on when you build out your Active Directory deployment and you want to see in your lab? Let's jump right into part 2. So I've got my desktop share here. Let's cut over to that. So where we left off in our last session, we were focusing on getting Hyper-V going on a system. By the way, I'm going to try to record this and make this a little bit bigger. Hopefully you can see better what's going on in our test environment. But our base configurations for our Autolab deployment is under Autolab, and then configurations. So under configurations, there are a series of folders that come by default. And one of the configs, and we deployed this in our last session just to show an Active Directory deployment, was this multi-role server 2016. And if we dig into this, there's a handful of files that are here, and these all come with Autolab out of the box. And each one of these have a role in deploying servers to Hyper-V. The VM configuration data.ps1, that contains a lot of definition data with, and let's open this up and maximize it, with the name of the domain. It gives you IP addresses that are assigned to these servers, and it basically deploys a Windows Server 2016 system. So looking at the top here, you've got the node name. This is password. We covered that last time. And it's setting up the basic network so that everything can talk to each other. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit. Here's the name of the domain out of the box. So everything that Autolab deploys is going to go to company.pri. And it's got your basic domain controller variables for where NTDS and sysvol is going to be deployed to. And then it starts talking about basic ADCS deployment and so on. If we scroll down a little bit, we can see that their Lability is defining a basic operating system deployment here, and it's deploying 64-bit Windows 2016 core. But if we look down just a little bit further, there's a series of definition ISOs that Lability and therefore Autolab can draw on to deploy operating systems. And there's a lot more than Windows Server 2016. So let's say you wanted to run a 2019 operating system deployment, or a mixed bag. You wanted multiple servers that you could deploy. You can certainly do that. And one of the places the place that you customize that is in this VM configuration data.ps1 file. Scrolling, and we're going to jump to this. I've got an updated file here that I can show you in just a minute. Defined in the body of the text are the roles that we're going to deploy to each of these servers. So the name of the node as it's being created in Hyper-V and what it's being called in Active Directory is being defined here under node name. It defines the IP address that's assigned to it, and then the roles that are going to this given server. So this particular, under the 2016 deployment out of the box, it's a domain controller, it's a DHCP box, and it's also doing routing, internet connection sharing so that stuff can get out to the internet. So that DHCP has to stay. I know it's not a great idea to put DHCP and run traffic through it, but it's a lot easier just to leave it that way. And it's set up as a baseline ADCS box. Your time zone is set here. You can also granularly deploy operating systems server by server. So you can grab curly brace to curly brace and actually add additional servers. So out of the box, this 2016 deployment is one domain controller. It's one server, which is a domain join server that's going to join this company.pri. And then it's going to install IIS under this with that web role. And then there's a client system that's being installed, which is being defined as Windows 10. And that particular box, it has RDP set up on it. It joins the domain. It calls RSAT, but as we saw in our last deployment, there's something going on with that particular module where RSAT doesn't install as expected, which is something that I need to dig into just a little bit further. But I wanted to get part 2 of this out so that those of you that wanted to customize this and dig a little bit further, you could get a 2019 box going if you wanted to. So that's the configuration data file. Now, let's say you wanted to add additional OUs, and so there are some basic or groups or Active Directory resources. There are a series of JSON files that are here that if we open these with Notepad, open this up. Under the company.pri file, these are things that are part of the canned installation for this 2016 basic deployment. So we get a marketing OU, that goes under the company.pri deployment. It's set up as a security. It's a global group, and it's got names of users that are deployed. And then if we dig in a little bit further, well, let me finish this. I suppose I should scroll all the way through this, but so these are the basic groups that are deployed and to what OUs those are deployed. And you can customize these further if you're familiar with getting the distinguished names and the paths set up properly. You can set up as many different groups as you would like and target them to specific OUs. Let's say you have a different set of custom OUs that you would like. Same idea. So these are OUs that target the root of the domain. So right now, out of the box, there's an IT, a dev, marketing, sales, accounting, and JEA operators OUs that are all deployed under the root of the domain. And then under this AD users JSON file, there are user accounts that are targeting. So that are targeted and deployed. So under, as an example, there's a user account that's deployed, a test user account that's called Mary L. It's going under the IT OU, again, under that company.pri domain. So what I recommend for you to do a custom deployment is follow the same process that you would with a certificate template, or if you had a baseline configuration in System Center. So if you had an operating system deployment task sequence, or a baseline image, take something that's out of the box and then duplicate it and customize it from there. That way you can always go back. So what I do is I duplicate one of the existing roles that are here, and then I modify it. So I took this multi-role server 2016 and I copied it, and then just pasted the folder in this directory and then renamed it. And so today we're going to use I renamed that and customized it, and it's going to be a GUI deployment of Windows Server 2019 instead of 2016. So I called it Minding the Key Store 2019. So we're going to dig into this. And here's some changes that I made in here just to give you an idea, some flavors. I customized the Active Directory environment to call it this is abbreviated, mindingthekeystore.pri. I left the DC build the same. I left the DHCP the same. I left my variables for Active Directory Certificate Services similar. I've modified some of these for playing around with it, but we've actually got a series for PowerShell deployments, using PowerShell to deploy ADCS, that we're going to dig into more. So even though these are custom, it's actually turned off. And if you look in the Lability Media variable here, I've got it set to the 2019 standard eval software. So here I customized the name of the domain controller. So naming conventions, you can, there's half a dozen different ways or more that you can name your resources. I tend to name my virtualization environment based on OS because it's usually OS driven, the testing. So Windows Server 2019 in this particular case, that's the domain level. That's the majority of the servers that are here. So I called it Lab 19 for Windows Server 2019 and then dash the role. And I like to make my resources at least two digits. So that, 0, 1 through 10, if you sort, it actually sorts properly in numerical order. And as far as roles, I removed ADCS from here. I changed the time zone under Lability time zone. And so on and so on. I've deployed a certificate authority, but I haven't actually installed any roles on it. So I made it join the domain. I put IIS on it because eventually we'll put the CA web and role service on it, and called for the RSAT role to go on that as well. And we did Windows Server 2019 data center for this particular deployment. And we set up a basic system that's domain join with the web role on that. That's going to be our CDP. Again, that's Windows Server 2019. Now this nano role has been commented out. It's no longer supported by Autolab. I've left it as part of the code, but it's not something that we mess around with. They were using nano for routing and remote access for everything to get out to the internet, but that's actually going through the DHCP role. And then for my client systems, I've got, the domain environment is Windows Server 2019. So again, I'm still calling it Lab 19, but I've deployed a Windows 8 machine, and here's my Windows 8 OS. Again, this is listed. You've got to paste this in exactly from what you have up here further in the list. You got to go apples to apples, copy it out of there and then paste it into these values. And, time zone and so on. And then I set up a Windows 10 deployment with the same thing. Once you have those things duplicated out, you can then jump to, let's look at the JSON file. So that, again, this is the, let's make sure this is the right one. Yeah, this is the 2019. So let's open up the AD group JSON file. So if we look here, I left the existing groups. If you decide that you want to name your domain something different, you need to remember to change all of your distinguished names to match, okay? So if you only go in the variable file we were just in, all of these are going to say company.pri, and none of the groups or users or OUs will be deployed. So you need to make sure whatever it is that you're going to call the domain in the domain build in that configuration file, PSD1, PSD1. Whatever it is that you call in there, you need to make sure to name the domain properly here. So I left the domains that Autolab has with accounting and JEA operators and so on and so on. But I did add some more. So we've got some basic administrators that we create as part of our standard build outs or lab deployments. So there's some additional groups, CA administrators, certificate template admins, and those are listed here. So I just tagged them onto the bottom. You can copy one of the existing values up above and then change the path and the name, and go from there. And then under OU, there's mining the key store lab. And I made sure to add that as well. And then under users, scroll down to the bottom. So there's a service account for backups, and then a generic account that would take the place of like a delegated role if this was in a production environment. So this is minding the key store admin. This is what you would delegate rights to in order to make template changes, or that way you don't create a user and give it enterprise admin rights in order for it to be able to do what it needs to do from a CA perspective. Once all of those things are in place, now if you look, we're deploying, let's look at this file. There's a DC. So that's one server. There's a DC. There's our CA target. That's 2 servers. CDP, that's 3 servers. A Windows 8 client, that's 4 boxes, 3 servers and a workstation, and then a Windows 10 machine. So 3 servers, 2 workstations, and it needed to pull all of the software down to do it. So I already deployed this. I ran it because we had gone through this process, and I've actually got some of the resources turned off because my streaming software was struggling a little bit with 5 servers and doing screen capture and recording me all at the same time. But it's already deployed all of these. We've gone through the update process, which I'll cover in another video. And it has started those systems. And if we go and look, I'm going to maximize this. Based on those definitions, there's definitions. I can't even speak. Based on those definitions, here is our minding the keystore.pri file. Here's the OUs that we talked about. There's our accounting. There's the JEA operators, because apparently somebody's using that for the one of the Pluralsight courses. There's marketing, and there's the groups and user objects in there. There's the servers OU, and here's our 2019 boxes. There's our CDP and our CA server. Now, they don't have those roles installed on them. That's just what the hosts are called, but they're domain joined. I didn't do that manually. If we go to domain controllers, there's our domain controller, Windows Server 2019 DC. And then if we go to the Minding the Key Store Lab OU, here are our resources for backups and administration. Now, keep in mind that the Autolab deployment that we're currently using does not include Windows Server 2022. That hasn't been added to the list yet, but I would guess that as soon as Pluralsight has courses that they're focusing on with Windows Server 2022, they'll update the platform and include those ISOs as well. If you wanted to use those for deployment, you would have to manually target those in Hyper-V and go through, upgrading Active Directory manually, like add a DC with Windows Server 2022, update the schema manually, and so on, which might be an exercise that you want to go through. If you've never done it before, that's a great process to practice with, but it's not something that's part of the automated deployment. That's the process to take a basic Server Core 2016 deployment from Autolab and change settings in it so it deploys Windows Server 2019 and puts a custom name on the domain, puts additional resources with it, basically customize it to whatever lab scenario you would like. If you found this information helpful, if you like this series and would like to see more episodes like it, we would love it if you would like, share, subscribe, hit the notification buttons. It helps let YouTube and the algorithms associated with it know that you are enjoying the content and helps share it with other PKI professionals such as yourself. We have another episode coming up soon where we continue to dig into further configuring things in Autolab. Until next time, I'm Brian Romo with PKI Solutions, and we'll see you soon.